네. Hello, S님. I live in Torrance, California. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to ask you a question. I have a sister who lives with her husband in countryside in Korea. And they used to be very rich. But they lost all their fortune during IMF. So now their financial situation is rather precarious. And they have a son who is in mid-40s. He lives in Seoul with his wife and then daughter. And he has a very serious illness. He's losing his capability to taking care of himself slowly. And then there's no treatment for that. And then so there's no hope for anything getting better. And her husband doesn't want to talk about their son's illness at all. He just ignores and doesn't offer any comfort to her son. So when my sister calls me on the phone, all her financial problems and her son's worsening disability and then her husband indifferent attitude. So he has a lot of unhappy things going on in her life. And then she says, sister, I envy you. You don't have any of my problem. So that's why you are happy. And then that's true. Really, I'm very happy. And then I have none of her problems. So I really don't know what to say to her. So my question is, when my situation is much better than hers, I don't experience any of her difficulties in life. How can I offer any comfort to her? What is the sort of practical things I can do sort of to reduce her unhappiness? Thank you.
네, 어떻게 위로의 말을 드릴까요? 냉정하게 말을 할까요?
So do you want me to provide you words of comfort or provide you an objective analysis of the situation?
Well, what I want is when you are much better situation, and then when here someone's difficulty, and then I have so many problems, but then is there anything I can offer to be helpful? Or I can say, yes, I studied Buddhism, I listened to the Dharma talk for Snim, so okay, all your problem is your mind. This is the Buddhist truth. But I don't think that's a really very kind of way to say things. So I really want to sort of both ways I want to hear. Okay, thank you.
욕심이 많으시군요. 네.
You're quite greedy.
이 담마 토크는 부드럽지만은 냉정한 얘기입니다.
It's Dharma talk, maybe packaged in a comforting way, but it's really look at an objective truth.
좋은 일 하면 천당 간다, 다음 생에 좋게 태어난다, 이런 축복을 하는 얘기가 아닙니다.
It's not a feel-good story, a blessing story about if you do good deeds, now, then you'll go to heaven in the afterlife.
나의 거짓된 마음, 나의 어리석은 마음, 나의 모순된 생각, 이런 것을 지적을 해서 그 모순으로부터, 그 어리석음으로부터 벗어나는 겁니다.
It is to help you to recognize the dishonesty within yourself, the contradiction that you live with, and to recognize them and be able to free yourself from them.
그렇기 때문에 자기의 생각을 붙들고 집착하면 제 얘기가 굉장히 가슴 아플 수가 있습니다.
So if you insist on holding on to that contradictions that you hold, then what I say to you will be hurtful.
왜냐하면 누구도 자기의 그 모순을, 자기의 거짓을 보고 싶지 않기 때문입니다.
Because no one enjoys looking at one's own dishonesty and contradiction.
네, 미리 말씀드리고 제가 얘기를 하려고 합니다.
So I'm going to speak to this and consider this as a forewarning.
네, 지금 그 조카의 아픔, 동생의 그 넋두리, 그것을 듣고 있는 자기, 이 세 사람 중에서 지금 자기가 질문하는 것은 누구의 문제입니까?
So, of the three players that you mentioned here, you yourself listening to your sister complaining about her situation, about including the sickness that your nephew suffers.
이것이 조카의 문제입니까? 동생의 문제입니까? 자기 문제입니까?
Whose problem is this? Is it your nephew's problem, your sister's problem, or is it your own problem?
Well, since I heard your Dharma talk often, I understand clearly it's their problems. But as a family members, I think I should offer some kind of a comfort. Because we cannot really tell the sort of a truth. Everybody die, so don't worry about death. That's not a really comforting word we can offer to especially our close relative sisters. I cannot say, yes, it's all problem is your mind. Just study Buddhism, listen to the Dharma talk, and then just all problem is caused by your mind. That's not a really kind way to tell her. So in a way, I should really kind of emphasize kind of her difficulties and then sort of feeling her difficulty and then should offer some comfort, but at the same time, kind of give her a way toward the Buddha's teaching. So there's a way you can also learn to reduce your unhappiness. But at the beginning, we have to be first to try to kind of be in her situation and to be more comforting toward her instead of telling the truth from the beginning.
이것이 동생의 문제라고 생각하니까 지금 동생을 깨우치려고 하고 있는 거예요.
Since you think this is your sister's problem, you're trying to kind of help enlighten her.
이것이 조카의 문제라고 생각하니까 조카를 고치려고 하는 거예요.
Since you think this is your nephew's problem, you're trying to fix his problem.
그러니까 이것이 조카의 문제라면 당신의 의사가 아니기 때문에 아무것도 할 수가 없습니다.
But if this is truly your nephew's problem, since you're not a medical doctor, there's really scant thing that you can do.
그거는 의사 일이지 자기 일이 아니에요.
Because that's the job of a medical doctor, not yours.
근데 의사 일을 자기 일로 자기가 착각하고 마치 자기가 뭐 어떻게 하면 할 수 있는 것 같은 지금 그 헛된 생각을 하고 있는 거예요.
But you are mistaken in thinking that you can do anything to really help your nephew overcoming his problem, even though you're not a medical doctor.
그 엄마도 이 일을 어떻게 할 수가 없습니다.
Even his own mother can't really do anything for him.
그것은 의사의 일이지 엄마의 일이 아니에요.
It's the role of a medical doctor to try to help him, not his mother.
근데 지금 동생이 자기 딸 때문에 괴로워하는 것은 의사의 일을 자기 일처럼 지금 잘못 생각하는 데서 생긴 문제예요.
The fact that your sister is suffering over the sickness that her son is experiencing is because your sister is mistaking herself to be a medical doctor.
내 동생만 잘못 생각하는 게 아니라 지금 질문자도 잘못 생각하는 거예요.
And it's a mistake that's not only made by your sister, but yourself as well.
딸 때문에 지금 괴로워하는 동생을 자기가 어떤 얘기를 해도 위로가 되지 않습니다.
There's nothing you can really say to be able to bring comfort to your sister who's suffering because of the condition his son is.
왜냐하면 자기가 어떤 얘기를 하면 그건 너 딸이 그런 경우가 없기 때문에 그런 말을 할 수가 있다 이렇게 생각하지 언니 말이 일리가 있다 이렇게 생각할 수가 없습니다.
Because from your sister's perspective, whatever comforting words or enlightening words you tell her, she's going to think that you can say that to me because you're not in my situation. You don't have a son that suffers from an incurable disease.
그러니까 내가 말을 하면 그것은 더 상처를 주지 도움이 안 된다는 거예요.
So what I'm saying, whatever words you tell her, they're going to cause more hurt, not help.
그러니까 도움이 안 되는 지금 처지에 있는데 마치 도움이 되는 사람 같이 자기가 지금 착각하고 있다는 거예요.
So basically, you're essentially in a position that you cannot offer any help, but you are mistaking and thinking that you're in a position that you could actually offer help.
그래서 그들의 문제가 이제는 자기 문제가 된 거예요.
That's why their problems has now become your problem.
근데 자기는 이게 자기 문제라는 걸 모르고 자꾸 그들의 문제라고 생각하는 거예요.
You don't realize that this is now your problem. You still think it's their problem.
조카가 아픈데 자기가 뭘 할 수 있어요?
What can you possibly do over an incurable sickness that your nephew suffers?
자식 때문에 걱정하는 그 동생에게 자기가 뭘 해줄 수 있어요?
What can you possibly do to help your sister who's worried about her son?
자기가 지금 하고 있는 거는 같이 괴로워해 주는 일이에요.
The thing that you are doing is really suffering along with them.
괴로워하는 것이 그들에게 무슨 도움이 됩니까?
So how does that help them?
자기에게는 무슨 도움이 됩니까?
How does that help you?
자기는 그들에게도 도움이 되지 않고 자신한테는 손실이 나는 일만 지금 하고 있는 거예요.
So you're doing things that doesn't help them, but also doing things that is causing you suffering.
정말 그들을 돕고 싶다면
If you really want to help them,
걱정하거나 괴로워할 일이 아니고
it's not a matter of worrying about them or suffering along with them.
그들이 필요한 일을 하는 거예요.
Then do things that they need.
조카의 병은 자기가 할 수가 없는 일이에요.
There's nothing that you can do to cure the sickness.
그럼 그걸 치료하는데 돈이 든다면 그들이 돈이 없고 내가 돈이 있다면 돈을 도와주는 거는 자기가 할 수 있는 일이에요.
But if they need financial help to help pay for the cost of treatment for that disease, and if you can, that's something you can do.
또 동생의 넋두리를 들어주는 것도 자기가 할 수 있는 일이에요.
And listening to your sister complaining about her situation, that is something that you can do.
동생은 자식에 대해서 집착돼 있고 자기가 할 수 있는 일은 없고 남편은 무관심하고 하니까 이 괴로움을 하소연할 데가 없으니까 언니한테 전화해가 하소연하는 거예요.
And your sister is in a position in which she can't do anything about the sickness that her son is suffering. She's in financial difficulties and she's living with a husband who's seeming indifferent. So she's calling you to have someone to listen to her situation.
그러면 동생의 입장이 돼서 힘드니까 나 언니한테 하소연하거나 하고 하소연을 들어주면 되는 거예요.
Then that's what you can do. Be a sympathetic ear to your sister.
그건 자기가 할 수 있는 일이에요.
And that is something you can do.
또 돈이 있다면 돈을 도와주는 것도 할 수 있는 일이에요.
And if you have additional money, then that is something you can help with.
또 방문해서 식사를 함께 하는 것도 할 수 있는 일이에요.
And visiting her and sharing a meal with her, that's something you can do.
근데 할 수 있는 일을 해야지 할 수 없는 일을 가지고 그들에게 아무도 도움이 되지 않는 일을 자기가 지금 생각하고 있을 뿐만 아니라 그것이 자기를 괴롭히고 있다는 거예요.
So you should really engage in doing the things that you can do to help them. Not really suffer yourself worrying about things that you cannot do for them.
그래서 이 전염병처럼 조카의 병이 엄마의 병으로, 엄마의 병이 언니의 병으로, 자신의 병이 남편이나 또 자기 가까이 있는 병으로 오늘 우리들에게까지도 그 병을 지금 전파시키고 있는 거예요.
So in a way, you're infecting others. This is like a contagion. The sickness that started as a physical illness with your nephew has really infected his mother, your sister, the dad, you, and by sharing this story with us, in a way, infected all of us listening to it.
그러니까 이것은 괴로워할 일은 아닙니다.
So what I'm saying, this is not a cause for suffering.
이거보다 더 어려운 소식이 이 지구상에는 무한히 많습니다.
Because there are countless stories that are worse than the story you just told us.
그러니까 조카는 그런 병이 걸리면 다른 사람 같으면 벌써 죽었을 텐데 집안에 여유가 있으니까 지금까지 살았잖아요.
So your nephew in other situations might have died more quickly than the treatment that they were afforded to give him.
이 지구상에는 콜레라라든지 홍역이라든지 이런 간단한 질병에 1년에 500만 명의 아이들이 죽습니다.
Now, throughout the world, there are over 5 million children who die from curable diseases like cholera.
그런데 이렇게 아주 치유하기 어려운 병을 앓고도 지금 살고 있지 않습니까?
But your nephew has managed to survive even though he's infected by a really rare and unique disease.
그러니까 여기에 정말 진실을 말한다면 참 세상 좋아졌다. 이런 병을 갖고도 이렇게까지 살아있는 것은 정말 감사할 일이다. 이런 마음을 내야 됩니다.
So if you really want to look at this with an objective truth, you have to really consider that your nephew is truly lucky for having been able to live with such a unique disease.
근데 동생에게 내가 그렇게 말하면 엄마가 딸이 그래도 안 죽고 살았다는 것은 참 감사할 일이다라고 하라고 내가 얘기해도 그 엄마가 오해할 소지가 있는데 언니가 그런 얘기하면 그건 도움이 되는 게 아니라 동생을 화나게 만든다 이거예요.
But if you were to tell your sister, saying that, you know what, you should really look at this objectively and be thankful for your son being able to survive despite his sickness, you know, that's not something that's going to be lightly and well taken by your sister. It's not going to be well taken when spoken by someone like me. Certainly not going to be well taken even if her own sister tells her.
그러니까 자기는 그런 말을 할 수가 없는 조건에 있는 거예요.
So basically, you're in a situation where you cannot really enlighten her with such things.
자기가 머리를 깎고 스님이 되고 신부가 되고 목사가 돼도 동생한테는 그런 말을 하면 부작용이 생깁니다.
Even if you were to convert and become a clergy, a member of Buddhism, or become a priest, even in that situation, you cannot really say those things lightly to your sister who's in that situation and she's not going to take it well.
그러니까 병을 치료하거나 동생을 위로하는 것은 자기가 할 수가 없다. 거기는 아무 도움이 될 수 있는 조건에 놓이지 않다. 이걸 먼저 알아야 돼요.
So first and foremost, what you need to realize is that you're not in a position to offer your sister comfort or cure your nephew's sickness.
내가 할 수 있는 건 첫째, 돈을 도와주는 거다.
What I can do, number one, is offer financial help.
근데 없으면 못 도와주는 거죠.
But if you don't have enough money, then you can't.
아까워도 못 도와주는 거고.
And you like to, but you can't.
두 번째는 하소연을 들어주는 거다.
Second is to hear her, listen to her.
세 번째는 같이 식사하고 얘기해 주는 거다.
Third is be with her, share a meal, listen to her in person.
혹시 아이에게나 동생에게 필요로 하는 것, 간단한 생필품이든 무슨 영양제든 그런 것들을 보내줄 수 있으면 나가 할 수 있는 일이다.
And if your sister needs something simple like essential goods or some cosmetics or some nutrients, vitamin supplements, then that's something you can do.
할 수 있는 일을 해야 된다는 거예요.
So what I'm saying, you have to do the things that you can.
우리는 내가 원하는 것이 다 이루어질 수도 없지만은 남이 원하는 것을 다 해줄 수도 없습니다.
So we know that we can't get everything we want. Also, we cannot give others everything they want.
그러니까 그런 병을 앓고 있는 그 조카도 그래도 살아있는 게 어느 거냐, 살아있어 다행이다 이렇게 생각하면 병을 앓고도 괴로움 없이 살 수가 있습니다.
If your nephew is suffering from incurable disease, if he shifts his attitude and thinks, you know what, it's good that I am able to live with this disease.
그런 자녀를 둔 엄마도 관점을 바로잡으면 행복할 수가 있습니다.
Even your sister who has a son with an incurable disease, if she attains the right perspective, she is able to be happy even in this situation.
그런 조카와 그런 동생을 둔 당신도 괴로움 없이 살 수가 있습니다.
And if you, with a sister and a nephew in that situation, can live without suffering.
이것이 바로 전염병을 방지하는 방법입니다.
This is really a way to stop that contagion.
외면하라는 게 아니에요.
I'm not saying to ignore them.
할 수 있는 것을 하라는 겁니다.
I'm saying that realize what you can do versus what you can't do and do the things that you can.
그런 면에서 관점을 마음을 다시 냉정하게 가지고 그들에 대해서 사랑으로 대해야 되는데 자기는 지금 집착되어 있다. 마치 내가 그들을 어떻게 할 수 있는데 방법을 몰라서 못하고 있다. 이렇게 생각하는 것은 잘못된 생각입니다.
So from that perspective, you have to approach the situation, deal with them with love, but you're dealing with them in a way with attachment based on the mistaken assumption that there is something that you can do to help them.
우리는 타인에 대해서 아무것도 할 수가 없습니다.
Essentially, there's nothing that we can do for others.
이게 제일 중요한 관점의 정립입니다.
And this is the most important definition of our lives.
아무것도 할 수 없지만은 밥은 한 끼 줄 수 있다. 관점을 이렇게 생각해야 돼요.
So there's nothing we can do essentially for others. However, I can at least share a meal.
얘기는 들을 수 있다.
I can at least listen to their stories.
이렇게 해서 자기가 할 수 있는 일에 대해서 긍정적으로 살펴야 합니다.
And look upon it with a positive light at those little things that you can do.
동생이 아무리 전화 와서 하소연을 해도 그래 내가 할 수 있는 거는 네 얘기 들어주는 거야. 그래 아이고 얼마나 힘들면 나한테 전화했겠니. 이렇게 생각하면 아무 문제도 없어요.
No matter how often your sister calls to tell her story, you know what? This is what you can do. And no matter how often she calls, and you're willing to listen.
스님, I have a question then. Is there any way I can help her to change her perspective? So she can okay, my son, that's his life. I have to live my life. Can I sort of help her look at it that way, so not to be so attached to her sons?
방법이 없습니다.
No, there's no way.
다른 사람에게 우리는 아무것도 할 수 없다. 이걸 먼저 가지셔야 됩니다.
You have to realize first and foremost, there's nothing you can do for others.
그건 누구든.
No matter who that is.
다만 밥 한 끼 사줄 수는 있다. 이렇게 생각하셔야 돼요.
But at least I can share a meal.
굶주리는 아이들이라면 배불리 밥은 내가 이래 보니까 밥 한 끼는 내가 먹일 수 있구나.
If there are hungry children, at least I can afford to buy them a meal.
네, 저 아이를 위해서 내가 옷은 한번 사줄 수 있겠다.
Or at least I can buy clothing for that child.
So you wouldn't advise me to sort of suggesting listen to the Dharma talk and then help she can look at it different way, her situation. You don't think it's such a good idea for me to do that?
네, 그건 권유해 볼 수는 있습니다.
You can make the recommendation.
그냥 종교적인 색채가 없는 그냥 재밌는 얘기를 하나 보내줄 수는 있습니다.
You can send her a link to a video that has no religious overtones, but maybe it's funny, maybe it's engaging.
특히 가족 관계에는 이 전법도 매우 유의해야 합니다.
However, trying to proselytize in a way, between families especially, you got to be careful.
만약에 부부가 갈등을 일으켜서 싸우고 그 남편한테 스님의 증문즉서를 보내준다면 남편이 그 제대로 받아들이겠습니까?
For example, say, as a couple, you had a fight with your husband, and then you send her one of my videos talking about what a husband should do. You think he's going to be receptive to that?
네 이거 듣고 정신 차려라 이런 얘기란 말이에요.
Basically, you're scolding him, saying that you listen to this and do what this guy tells you.
그렇기 때문에 이 이해관계가 된 상태에서는 전법을 할 수가 없습니다.
And that's why it's very difficult to proselytize or work on, trying to teach others when you have a existing dynamics of relationship with them.
그냥 상대를 바꾸려는 어떤 의도를 가지고 전법을 하면 그것은 부처님의 말이라도 상대에게는 비수가 됩니다.
Because if you're trying to change others and trying to use Dharma to change others, even that Dharma, even that Buddha's teaching becomes a dagger by which to hurt the others.
그냥 이 기쁨을 함께 나누고 싶다 이런 가벼운 마음으로 전법을 해야 합니다.
The only way to spread this is a way to share this with a light mind, this attitude of wanting to share the joy that you yourself felt.
야, 이거 듣고 나니 너무 재밌더라. 니 한번 들어봐라. 이렇게 돼야 된다는 거예요.
basically, hey, this was really fun for me. Why don't you listen to it too, see how you like it.
So actually, I sent her the link to the happiness school, and then she was quite reluctant. And then I felt like she felt I'm forcing my way of life to her. So as you mentioned, maybe I have to be very careful within kind of between sisters. Kind of, even though I'm very happy at learning Buddhism and then the Buddha's way of teaching, but it's very difficult to share. Oh, I have this wonderful teaching. I want to share with you. But then kind of in a way, kind of she wouldn't feel like I'm forcing my way toward her.
네, 저희가 너무 불교에 집착되어 있으면 그렇습니다. 불교에 집착하지 말고, 이 법은 나를 기쁘게 하구나, 이렇게만 생각해야지 어떤 목적과 의도를 가지면 상대는 저항하게 됩니다.
And that happens because when you are too attached to Buddhism, even Buddhist teachings, if you're too attached, you become too much of a champion of that thing, and there's an intent behind that you want to change people with those teachings that you share.
부다는 그들이 괴로움을 호소하거나 도움을 요청할 때 말을 했지, 그들이 가만히 있는 데 가서 네 문제다 이렇게 얘기한 적이 한 번도 없습니다.
So Buddha only taught people who came to him with questions and suffering. He never actually went to somebody and told that person, you're in trouble, you're suffering.
전쟁하겠다는 사람한테도 전쟁하면 안 된다 이런 말을 한 적이 없어요.
Even those people who actually wanted to go to war, he never told that person, don't go to war.
그냥 길을 막고 명상을 하고 있었습니다.
What he did is just block the road and meditated on the road.
그러니까 왜 이때 악볕에서 명상을 합니까? 저 그늘에 가서 명상을 하죠 하고 그 장군이 물었습니다.
And so the general who was leading the army said, why, Buddha, why do you meditate in the sun, in the middle of the road, when you can meditate more comfortably in the shade over there?
장군이요, 아무리 좋은 그늘이라 하더라도 친족의 그늘보다 더 좋은 그늘은 없습니다. 이렇게 말했어요.
And he said, dear general, even though that shade might be wonderful and cool, there's no shade that's cooler and more wonderful than the shade of a kin.
이 장군이 부다의 친족을 이렇게 공격하러 가는 중이었습니다.
And he told them because that general was on the way to make war against his tribe, Buddha's original tribe.
그러니까 그 장군은 부다가 원하지 않는 줄을 알고 되돌아갔습니다.
So the general then realized that this war was not something Buddha wanted, so he returned and sent back his army.
그러니까 강요해서는 안 됩니다.
So what I'm saying is that you can't force your views on somebody.
불교가 좋은 건 내가 좋은 거지 동생한테 좋은지 안 좋은지는 알 수가 없습니다.
Because it's you that likes Buddhism. You have no idea whether your sister is going to like Buddhism.
내가 소고기 먹어보고 맛있다고 힌두인에게 야 이거 맛있다 먹어라 하면 그들에게는 큰 고통이 됩니다.
So if I eat some beef and I love the food, but I can't go to a Hinduist and say, hey, try this out, because that will actually cause suffering to them.
내가 돼지고기 맛있다고 무슬림한테 야 이거 먹어봐라 맛있다 이렇게 하면 그들에게 고통이 된다는.
And just because I like pork, I can't offer pork to Muslims because it's going to cause suffering to them.
우린 지금 이렇게 내가 좋다고 남도 다 좋을 거라고 착각하고 있습니다.
Because the mistake we're making in this is we assume that what we like, others will like as well.
네.
Thank you very much.
네. 얘기 들어보겠습니다.
Yes, when the S님 says no one can help others, when that cold truth, stark truth, I felt a little sad, but then also somewhat free. And then only thing I can do is just listen to my sister's complaint and then give some financial help. Thank you.
인간이 다른 사람을 도울 수 없다는 것은 들으면 굉장히 좋은 일이잖아요. 아, 아무도 도울 수 없구나. 도울 수 없는데 그래도 나는 다람쥐나 토끼보다는 조금 나아가. 그래도 밥이라도 사주고 옷이라도 사주고 말이라도 들어주는, 야, 동물보다는 내가 그래도 조금 낫구나. 얼마나 기분이 좋은 일이에요.
So the truth that an individual and one person cannot really help others is actually a positive thing. So based on this truth, if you can give a little help by buying somebody food, sharing a meal, buying clothing, or listening to them with a sympathetic air, there's something that you can do on top of this cold objective truth.